Hello guys, this is Elkskins. I'm down at Jim's place and we're gonna do a little bit of a comparison from newer and older, and then also we're gonna do a little bit of talking. So that is a, what is it?
That's the 68.
1968 Sears Suburban 12. And this is a, well, it's a conglomeration of different years. Craftsman, GT. So, when they were back then, they were built extremely heavy. Thick frames, good rear ends, which they used up until the ending of this, but they did a different version of the rear end. They had 3 points back then, where it says have a sleeve hitch.
But I know that some of these square body tractors could take a 3 point. I think this one could too.
Yes, the 3 point has to be on brackets to space it out. Right.
Anyways,
But the electric sleeve hitches, or not electric sleeve hitches, but the electric 3 points go right up on them.
so you can do either. They're more versatile, really, when it comes to the rear lift than these are.
Right.
You could get a sleeve hitch setup, but it had to fit on the 3 point.
Or somebody, like I've seen, they modify it. They modify.
Yeah, but for factory, I mean, you had to have the 3 point on to add a sleeve hitch adapter.
Right.
These you can do either way. You can do a 3 point or a sleeve hitch.
Right, and if you want a sleeve hitch on a 3 point, you had to have shorter arms, which I got, for the adapter.
Those arms for me?
Yeah.
I thought so. I think you also got the long handle 3 point.
No, I bought that on off of eBay.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, somebody else got my passwords. I don't have it anymore.
The only downside to the older 3 points is there's no lift assist. Alright. Whereas on this, you have a lift assist spring that you tighten up whether you have a heavy attachment on the back or a light one.
And that's the reason for the shorter or longer lift arms for different things like the tillers.
Right.
And things. But they did have offer a longer lift arm for the 3 points to help leverage
Right.
a little bit. Or
The extension,
The
which I
factory-
gave you that extension
right, I
last
got the
year.
extension from you, but I have no good clamp
Clamp,
for it,
yeah.
so we don't want to try to actually use that because someone could get hurt, me if I'm on the tractor. But,
Right. But pretty much the tire-wise, with this being a Suburban, it had skinny tires in the front and skinny and small ones in the back, if I remember right.
well, if we get into 68 now, 850 23s would have been on like some of the 12s and things, but they had the 750 22s also, that 66, 67 on the base Suburbans. As we get into the higher ups, the SS Suburban,
Right.
one of the Super Suburban or SS features that you got was the wider wheels and tires. Now these aren't correct on this.
Right.
These front spindles and the drag links are off of a later Suburban. They were heavier duty, so I put those on there. The rear wheels are extra wide Suburban wheels, and were only put on a couple of models, to my knowledge, in the late 70s, like the GT18 and the 19.9. They're actually an 8.5 inch wide rear wheel.
And an SS18, because I also set off one of them.
I thought I said that, but yeah, you're right. And then the 10 inch wide Sears branded tires with that style of tread, which bite really well. But so it's got later wheels and tires and later spindles and drag links that are heavier duty. The front wheels are also off of a GT or an SS18. I can't remember exactly. They're off a late model. It's got the front wheels and the wide tires.
Right. Whereas this came stock with the wide, deep dished wheels and 1050s on the back.
That one there was a 12 horsepower originally. Now it's got a 16 horsepower to come see. But it's still way overpowered compared to, what's that guy?
23 horse.
Yeah, 23. So.
But in torque values, that one's probably got more torque.
I don't know if it, I mean, it's a cast iron. They made a lot more torque than the aluminum engines. They're strong. But now with that being a V-twin.
Yeah, that's a whole nother class.
Yeah, that's making some power. But if you were to compare this to a 16 horse modern single aluminum or maybe even an 18 horse twin, it's going to be real close. The cast iron engines made a lot of torque.
Right.
They're from an era when the engines were used industrial, and you could put them on everything from stationary equipment to, of course, garden tractors and different things that had to operate at different RPMs.
So, you know, they, like, okay, this red GT can do just as much as that old orange one.
Well, there was a front end loader available on these up to, was it 91 or 2 or 3 right in there.
Right.
And really, in my opinion, the only reason they quit offering that loader, this is just my opinion.
Because the frames were a little thin.
No. I don't believe they didn't change the frame when they quit offering the loader. But you know what they did do?
What?
The first year they went vertical shaft, they quit offering the loader. So now they would have had to reposition the pump and figured out where to to have easily have driven it. I always figured it was because, they repositioned the orientation of the engine.
Right. Have you ever seen one of those GTs with a loader?
Yeah.
I've never have, and I always wondered how they powered the pump. Is it off the electric clutch?
I've never looked at one up close and personal, but I would assume...
Because the backside of those engines were for drive only.
Yeah, I would imagine probably a quick Google search would tell us that, but I've never looked up close and personal for the pump. But I have seen them with the loader on them. And my biggest concern with them wouldn't be the frame. I always thought the frames were good and heavy. The steering is probably the weak link in the later Craftsman Roper GT tractors.
Yeah, I have videos on the steering on these. It's the #1 issue with these tractors is the steering box.
Other than that, I mean, they're really stout. I think the frames are stout. Of course, you can see the front axle's stout.
Yeah, that's probably, a cast iron.
And possibly stouter than the Suburbans used a boxed tube axle. So it's probably as strong, if not stronger than the factory. And they had, of course, a front end loader was available with these from 66 on.
Right. Yeah, the frames on these are not as thick.
No, but it's got a stout rear end under it. This
right.
is a stout rear end that's in this, though.
Yeah, it's a hydrostat.
Mm-hmm.
Hydro gear.
Right. And I think hydro gear. Of course, that's a hydro gear made from little, wheat light to the heavier strong.
Right.
Like in this. And
I've only seen a couple hydro gears fail.
Yeah, if I recall, and I may be wrong, so I think that hydro gear is affiliated, associated with Sunstrand. Now, Sunstrand is the toughest hydro they ever put in a garden tractor. They will, a Sunstrand hydro, man, they're just about indestructible. Eaton's a great hydro, but the Sunstrand's got them whooped. Vickers is the smoothest hydro there was ever out there. Not a lot of tractors had it, a few did, but the Vickers is super smooth. I mean, there's no jerk. Good strong hydro, but completely smooth. But the Sunstrand is about indestructible. And as I recall, they have an affiliation with Sunstrand. Of going way back, and I don't remember exactly what it is, and I could be wrong, but I'm believing that I'm not. Hydro gear is a good transaxle, and each application is good for the application it's made for. The LT application is good for those. The GT is a good strong one for the GTs.
Right. And normal hydro gear failures that I see, a couple was, well, one was a pump, the other was a gear or a motor drive. I'm not sure, I never dug into it because it happened to me personally on a lawn tractor. And the other was our buddy Casey when he was having issues with his cub slowing down, and well, I told him, I said, well, crack it open. He cracked it open, did a service to it, put it back together, no go. So.
I didn't realize he'd had trouble with one.
Uh-huh. So we had at Terrell's, we had a Cub that was very similar, that had an older transmission, and it worked perfectly. Oh, getting your coffee?
I must.
So.
It's a cold day. It's a cold day. Tyler picked today, on this snowy day. It's not snowing now. It was a little earlier. He picked a good chilly day to come down and do this, so I'm going to need my coffee.
Oh, yeah. So.
And Rowdy doesn't want to run. Old R&R here, the 68, always wants to run. Well, I shouldn't say always. It's really, really hard to start anyway. Runs beautifully once it starts, but it's cold today, so it doesn't want to run today. And it may have just fried my starter trying. So we rolled it out here for our comparison of the tractors. But yeah, it's cold enough that Rowdy don't even want to run today.
So now, here's one thing that I'm going to run past you because there's a lot of comments I've been seeing. People say that a hydro transmission is only good for mowing.
I don't believe that at all. And it's like what I said a while ago. A sunstrain is almost indestructible. And a sunstrain will put down more torque to the ground than an Eaton or an Eaton 11 or a Vickers, like was in some of the Simplicities, Alice's, the early hydro tractors, the Gilsons. But that's not true at all, in my opinion. The only difference really between a gear drive and as far as what they'll put to the ground and how tough they are, they have a pop-off. And
they have a relief bypass valve.
A pop-off, so to speak. And when they get so much pressure against them, they basically bypass and they won't put any more torque to the ground. But the reason for that isn't because it's going to break the transmission. It's basically a safety to keep from breaking the tractor or overdoing it or flipping it over or whatever.
Yeah.
We've got hydro transmissions that have been out here for decades, 5, 6 of them now, back into the 60s, that have been plowing and disking and cultivating gardens. They have been grading driveways and grading dirt and grading. These hydros have been working for decades.
Right.
And they're still out there working hard. They're still not broken. But they're a GT hydro. They're built to the spec. They're built to be a ground engaging transaxle. Now, an LT transaxle, a little light duty lawn tractor transaxle, that's a different story. You're not supposed to go out and do ground engaging work. But
right.
Anyway, I'm on a rant, but no, that's a big misconception. And there's so many misconceptions with these old garden tractors today. We could spend about 3 weeks discussing a lot of them. But if a hydro transaxle is for a GT, a true GT transaxle, then it's just fine to plow or disc your garden or whatever you want to do. There's really... that's just a misconception that it's like an automatic transmission in a car versus a gear drive.
Yeah.
That's really the big difference.
The thing here is, the way I look at it is, a lawn tractor rear end for like your hydro, that's like your a car transmission. And a hydro and a GT, that's like a truck transmission. That's the way I look at it.
Basically, yeah, that's basically the same idea. Or a half-ton truck you know, is the same as an LT. You know, it's always a half-ton Chevy over there. And then my 3/4 ton truck over there is the GT. My Dana 60 axles front and back.
Right.
And heavy, a little thicker frame, heavier springs, heavier brakes, and it's the same way here. It's got, and it kind of is the half-ton, 3/4 ton thing. Where the half-ton is kind of the standard lighter truck to do lighter work and everyday drive, and the 3/4 ton has got the bigger, heavier axles and the heavier brakes and the heavier frame and suspension and even charging systems and wiring and cooling systems. And GTs are the same compared to LTs. They look a lot the same, like a half-ton and a 3/4 ton truck, but the components can be very much different. So this might be the guy about the seat here.
Okay, so we'll have to...
Yeah, we'll take a break. Cut!
Yeah, cut. Okay, we're back.
We are?
I hope so. So,
Where'd we go?
I don't know. So some people are saying that this Craftsman T240 turn type hydrostat riding lawnmower is a garden tractor.
What did you do with my glasses? That's what is it now?
They're saying that customers, or not customers, but people at the salesmen are telling them, hey, this is a garden tractor.
Does that look like a garden tractor? That's not a garden tractor.
That's a lawnmower.
That's definitely a lawnmower. You can see one of the big giveaways, if you don't know the difference well, is when the screen goes black. Is actually the small wheels and tires. If it's a tiny wheeled and tired machine, that's not going to be a garden tractor. Garden tractor's going to have, as a rule, at least a 12-inch rear wheel and an 8-inch front wheel.
Right.
That's definitely a mower. Yeah, today the thing is, even a lot of what they classify as a garden tractor is not compared to 30 years ago.
Right, and like after the GT 5000 line ended, Husqvarna took over production, and they are selling garden tractors that use the same frame as the lawnmowers, and they just rip the frames out.
Well, it used to be back in the day, you had really 3 tiers. You had an LT, which was a lawn tractor.
Right.
You had a YT, which was it was a yard tractor, which they're calling garden tractors today. But you had, which was a little stouter, and YT was a little stouter than an LT. But if you wanted an actual garden tractor, you went to the GT.
Right.
The GT was the full-on ground engaging. You could get a front end loader for them, or any plows and discs and cultivators, so forth, ground engaging. The YT was strong enough to take rough lawns like we got out here, yards, take a beating and keep on ticking, pull heavy loads around with the trailer, push a snow plow, do all that and still be expected to live.
Right.
An LT, you had to be careful. It was for mowing and take it easy with it. So today what they're calling our guy just bought a seat and left. He's coming back to see us while we're filming. But today they're calling a lot of those YTs GTs, and they're really kind of in between a lawn tractor and a garden tractor.
Right. And you gotta watch what you're doing when you're at like a box store, let's say Lowe's, because that was the Lowe's website. Because the Craftsman representative is just trying to make a sale. He'll tell you anything. He'll tell you the sky is green if it makes a sale. You know? That's where you guys have to watch.
Well, in my opinion, too, they don't build anything today, and people are going to disagree with this, but they don't build anything today with the same thought in mind that they built 30, 40, and 50 years ago. Now, people are going to say that things are built better because with computers they're able to really design things better. But the materials that they use today, I believe they purposely use weaker materials because they need to resell you another GT or LT in 5, 6, 7, 8 years. They can't stay in business if a tractor will last 40 or 50 years.
Right.
The materials, and they also use thinner materials to save money today.
Right.
So there's a lot of differences, and yeah, technology's increased, I mean, 100-fold. So there's a lot of goodies that go with the new equipment. But I believe longevity and strength has suffered a lot.
They're on average, like MTD, they're producing their mowers to only really last 400 hours.
Yeah, that's what sounds far off.
They just want that money. They don't care about the consumer anymore.
Well, I mean, in the end, that's what companies are about, really. They're about making a profit. But you're right, to some extent, they have lost any. But, I mean, we're at the society we live in today. That's what they want, though. Most people want to buy a cheap mower from Home Depot or from Walmart for $1,000 and use it just a season or two and buy a new one and always have a shiny brand new one in their garage.
Right.
So it actually goes hand in hand with what companies today like MTD are wanting to do.
Right.
That's one reason that Wheelhorses no more, and a lot of these companies, people today aren't going to pay thousands and thousands of dollars for a tractor built like a Wheelhorse or even the old Suburbans and things.
Or even like a GT 5000.
Right. They're just not going to give that kind of money today.
Right.
And not only, well, there's many reasons, but another reason is back when these things came out, they were in an era when people did a lot of things for themselves that they don't do today.
Right. They grew their own food in the back with the garden and whatnot. A lot of people, they say, oh, that's too much work.
Well, and they graded their own driveways with them. If they had a front end loader, they might use it for landscaping and mulching and dirt work and different things around their little 1 acre.
Right.
I mean, they graded their own driveways and done things. Today, well, I mean half the people today pay somebody else just to mow the yard.
I know.
So,
and something else. If you're one of those people who always like buy store-bought tomatoes, okay? They don't have the flavor. They don't have the texture that the ones that you grow yourself.
Preach it. Because I'm very much in agreement. I can't, whenever I go to McDonald's, I tell them to hold the salad.
Right.
Because the store grown, the hothouse stuff, the stuff that's mass produced to sell and to last in a dark warehouse for months is not the same as the Rutgers and things that I'm growing out here in my garden. The taste, the texture is so much better. You're right.
Right. I refuse to eat the hothouse.
I don't either. I love the homegrown tomatoes. Right. I mean, I'll eat them out of the gardens. I'm picking them. But I don't even, when I go to the store, well, my wife, she'll buy tomatoes or whatever, but myself, I don't, and that goes for most hothouse vegetables, not just tomatoes.
Right.
Onions don't have the flavor, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, I know, but it's mainly tomatoes that really irks me. They just are bland.
Yeah, and what's this deal we've all went to romaine lettuce? We can't even, I want some leaf lettuce at the store. They're all trying to sell. And same with my hamburger. Now they're trying to put romaine lettuce on my hamburger, and it's not right. I grew up on leaf, and now they're trying to wean me of it and change me to romaine, and I don't want it.
You know, so.
This is Moki over here.
Oh yeah.
Hi, Moki. Yeah, Moki. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, they like seeing cats in videos, so.
Well, this is Smokey. Came to us as a kitten. Hi, Moki. She's a good girl. She's kind of a wild girl. She's very friendly, but she'll get up on my shoulder and sleep, literally. She's a very friendly little girl.
Okay,
But she's a rowdy little girl.
Oh yeah.
Her's a rowdy girl. Her's a rowdy girl. And she sat up here. Now she doesn't want to. She's no camera shy today.
Right. But in the end, you know, things are not built like they used to be, that's for sure. And there's a reason for it. If people still built engines like, okay, I'll use a Briggs cast iron. The company right there. If they still made them like that, they would be out of business. You know, because the engines nowadays even are just made as a throwaway item.
Everything pretty much is. Everything has a built-in lifespan today, and that's not on purpose. That's not an accident. Because companies, they need to be able to stay in business. And whether it's pickup trucks or mowers or dishwashers, everything has a built-in lifespan for the most part. And that lifespan keeps you coming back and me coming back and keeps the company in business. Not that a lot of the equipment doesn't live past that projected lifespan, but they do. They basically have a lifespan built in, and the quality of materials and the types of materials, they want it to last this long on average. And whether it's a mower, a dishwasher, or a pickup truck, but that's the way it is today. And even if today you want a heavy duty a GT, definitely do some research if you're going out to buy a new one, because what Tyler just showed us was an LT that he says they're calling a GT.
Yeah, because the Craftsman salesmen or the salesmen that you're talking to at a box store, they're just trying to get you to buy something.
Well, most of the time they know less. They don't know much about it.
Right.
But definitely do some research. You can look into the transaxles used in models and the engines and the frames, and you can find reviews. But if you're wanting a GT, if you want a machine that'll push snow and dirt, maybe run a pull behind rototiller, or maybe you're going to actually use it with, because you can still get a sleeve hitch and a moldboard plow from Brindley. So maybe you want to plow with it, the garden. And if that's the case, it's going to cost you some money because they're fairly expensive. A real GT today is fairly expensive, as they were back then.
I think John Deere's really the only one that has a garden tractor anymore.
Well, Simplicity still has a really stout.
Right, they do also.
And you can get front wheel assist and a loader and a small backhoe. But it's my understanding though they are discontinuing that line now.
Right.
But people aren't paying. It's $20-some thousand for one with a loader and a backhoe.
Right.
Well, people are going to step up to a subcompact. They're not going to buy the little, but they're really nice for a small area. You're on an acre or two, and you get in all these little buildings and areas with that little tractor, and work with the bucket and the backhoe. Or if you got a horse stalls, a horse barn, they're really nice to clean out with. But most people aren't going to pay that kind of money, so it doesn't surprise me they're discontinuing. But they are available front wheel assist, and I do think that they kind of compete with the higher end Deere GTs.
Right, because around where I live, you don't really see a lot of Simplicity.
Well, you don't see around where I live. I don't see hardly anything new in a heavy duty GT.
Right.
Everybody's riding mowers, but you don't see anybody, actually working these little machines. If they're working them anymore, most people don't know the difference anymore.
Right.
And they're working a subcompact at minimum, or an old farm tractor out here somewhere, like a little old Ford or an oldie. So I really don't see any new GTs around here. Haven't recently. Not true GTs.
Right. I haven't either. I mean, neighbor behind me has a X724 all-wheel steer John Deere, which he completely destroyed that one. Can't even put a fuse in for the headlights. It wants to start a fire.
I don't know. I don't even mess with the newer stuff. I'm an old school guy, and I mess with the old stuff. There's Smokey checking out the Craftsman GT.
I mean, people have seen that I've been running a lot of the newer Craftsmans. Well, there's a reason. I don't want to work the older ones as hard. Because parts are getting harder to find. I mean, like, if I break a drag link or if the steering part goes out on the Craftsman, I just go and order a brand new one.
Right. That's true. That is true. They're the old ones, the really old ones, you know, back in the 60s, they're almost more of a novelty now than a worker.
Right.
So almost more of a, well, more of a hobby, more of a, I mean, don't get me wrong, they'll work and they'll work hard. But like Tyler said, if you break parts, it is tougher to, and I'm not saying they're not out there. Parts are out there. If you're in the loop and you know people, I mean, I've gotten friends to ship me pieces I've needed from California.
Right.
That was on a case 195 I was redoing.
And you've helped me find parts for the customs from time to time.
Yeah. So I mean, they're out there, but they are tougher to find than the newer stuff.
Right.
Well, I much prefer working on the really oldies. They're so simple. So you say, why don't you work on that and finish it? I will one day. I've only had it 4 or 5 years. Someday it ain't that long. I'll get to it.
I mean, you've had that 700 since 90 something, and it still doesn't have a seat on it.
Yeah, only since '93. I mean, I'll get to it. You would think I would, though. But you know, my problem is a lack of staying focused.
Yeah.
There's always something else to fiddle with, and I really do need to finish some of these up. But they really are simple to work on. Going by and watching this here,
They're making us thinking we're crazy.
right? But the newer machines are better to work with than the old ones, as far as if you break something, you're chasing parts. But the old ones really are fun to work with. You take these Suburbans, they steer so light that it's almost like they have power steering. I mean, they turn so easy. It's sitting completely still, but if you're just moving a little bit, they're just almost just one finger, and they shift. Well, that doesn't have the 6-speed. The 3-speed high and low is available up to what, around 2,000, right in there?
The last production year of the GT 5000, I think, was 2008.
Okay, did that have the 3-speed high-low?
Yes.
Well, and they did, as Tyler said earlier, they went through some changes through the years. The early ones had a 4-pinion differential, and then somewhere in the 70s, I think they went to a 6-pinion, and there was some other changes, but they shift so beautifully. I mean, just like butter, they just click, click.
Like on the Customs, which are the smaller, cheaper garden tractors back in the 60s and early 70s, their high and low transmission used a powdered gear.
Well, and I think some of the Suburbans did too.
Maybe, but the Craftsman GT 6000s and 5000s and whatnot, they also used the powdered transmission gears.
There was and I can't remember his name. He used to go by on the forums years ago, Sears Puller, that went through some transmissions over the years pulling, and he had talked about using what you call the powdered geared transaxles and having less luck with those than the earlier gears.
Right.
So basically, if you took an earlier transaxle and had a 6-pinion, or took the gears out of an earlier transaxle, I don't know if that would work. I'm putting in a 6-pinion diff transaxle would be like the ultimate Sears
transaxle. Now, something that I was going to address, we're going to turn back a little bit. And in the late 60s, early 70s, Roper built hydro tracks. And you can look up Rooney on YouTube. He's got videos on the subject. I don't know, really, I don't know if I can't remember if I even watched one exactly, but I've there's a coupling inside the transmission that likes to strip on a lot of heavy use.
Well, now there was 2 different versions of that. Now
Okay.
I'm familiar with both of those too.
The later versions you're familiar with, I'm thinking.
Well, I'm familiar with the earlier versions also, and it's the same. The earlier versions used the same rear end and pump as what was used in the Massey garden tractors, the MF10 and MF12.
Okay.
And one of the, besides the issue you're talking about, another issue people run into, the filter screen's actually internal in them and is long discontinued. And so one of the things, Massey collectors that have got like the MF12 hydros have been searching for a replacement source for those filter screens for a long time, and no one makes them. So, and that's one of the things, so whether it's a Sears or a Massey, you'll run into with the early.
Right.
Now the later ones, those are stout. That's a hydro pump.
Like a Dana, if I remember right.
On a Dana 30 axle. So you got a Dana 30 axle, and where your pinion gear, where your yoke would be for your drive shaft, you've got your Sunstrand pump is mounted. So you've got like I said, the Sunstrand pumps are about indestructible. They're stout, they're tough, and then you've got that mated to a Dana 30. And in my opinion, that was one of the toughest hydros put into a garden tractor back then, and they just don't get any credit for that. But that was and the one thing about the Suburbans though was they didn't change the chassis from 1966 through the end there, about 1980-ish.
Right, because they made it
80s.
like 80 or 81 was the very last model. Of whichever one was the GT18 with the single-cylinder cast iron Tecumseh.
And it actually said Craftsman on it as opposed to Sears, like on your Suburbans up until then. But you'll have a lot of people say 79 was the last year, and I've contended for a long time it was 80. But so that's an argument, that's a debate. But they didn't change the chassis on these from 66 through the end.
Right.
And so when they originally designed them, they were just designed for the little single Tecumseh and no real extras. So when you got into putting these
Onins and Briggs.
right, then they had to do some modifying and barely made them fit, and there's no extra room. They moved around the battery and the tank and different. They put the tank under the seat with a taller seat spring. I love the earlies because you've got the short seat spring here and it sets you down a little bit lower. Of course, this is my favorite style.
Right.
But the reason for that is the hood. I just love this style. The hood's a little bit longer than all the other styles, and the grill's a little narrower up at the top. So it's a little different hood and grill. And then you've got the tall dash with the flat wheel at the back, and I love that look. But anyway, where I was going with things like the hydro, there was nowhere to put things. There was no room underneath, up top. So you'll find the filter is actually mounted on the top of the frame right there in front of the seat. There's Moki, by the way, again.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there was when they got bigger, there was more places to put things and hide things. Right. On the early tractors, they were designed with just enough room for what they were doing at the time. Well, then they ran that design out for a decade and a half, and as the engines got bigger and they went with hydros, they really had to work to make that stuff fit in those chassis.
Right, like the hydro in this one, it's about 3/4 of the size of a high and low transmission, and the filter's underneath. One of my neighbors has one of these GTs, and he actually ripped a line off of it a couple of years ago.
I could see that.
Because they have the lines hanging down. That's one drawback on that.
The National Weather Service has issued a special weather statement.
Uh-oh.
I don't know if you just got that from my phone back here, but the National Weather Service said that elk skins out here are retarded because it's winter time and we're doing this video. Well, they might have said a special weather statement.
Right.
It's all the same.
But another thing I seen was they said that these high and lows are bulletproof, which, okay, me personally, I've blown up a couple. I ain't gonna lie. Of course, I abuse them, Have you ever hurt high and low?
I have not, but let me play devil's advocate here as far as that goes. Wheelhorse with an 8-pinion differential won the 8th axles. I remember years ago on Red Square Wheelhorse Farm, there was a guy who got his stuck in ice and mud, and he left it there and he went back to get it the next day, and I couldn't find the thread again if I had to, but I remember thinking, wow, this was years and years ago. But he had literally, it sunk down in, it froze. And don't let people tell you that a belt-driven machine can't bite. As long as the belt is right with the pulleys, he broke an axle shaft, a 1 1/8 inch axle shaft, 8-pinion differential machine, and he broke it trying to get out. It was that frozen into the mud. I don't care what you've got.
There's limitations. Yeah.
There's you can only go so far with any of them. I mean, you can break anything. That'll be my youngest making noises in there.
Right.
You can break any of them. So, but in my opinion, they're great stout transmissions. I mean, these things have worked for decades upon decades, and they've plowed, they've disked, there's loader tractors. It's not an issue breaking the transmissions. It doesn't come up.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. I like Wheelhorse and whatnot, but their transmissions I always seen was a little bit weaker than these because...
Oh boy, you're going to get some feedback on that remark.
Well, I'm going to be honest with you, okay? I've seen a lot of failures on the Wheelhorse transmissions over the years.
Did you ever watch Tool Time, where Tim Taylor says something stupid and Al holds up a piece of paper and says, usually it's against women, he says, and that's Tim Taylor at P.O. Box, so they can all write and complain.
Well,
because you're going to get some of that here.
Well, you know, I'm a Wheelhorse guy myself, but you know what I'm trying to say is I've seen a lot of failures myself in them, more than what I've seen in a Sphere.
Honestly, I have not seen, you know, in my opinion, and I'm a Simplicity Alice guy, and I'm about to take, I'm going to get some feedback now. In my opinion, I think the Wheelhorse transmissions are stout as bulls. I don't think these are quite as stout, but I do think they're stout. Right. So we vary a little there, but we kind of agree. That, you can't see it, but there's my 725 sitting behind us in the building. Simplicity 725. The Simplicity Alice transmissions are the least bulletproof of most of the garden tractor transmissions, in my opinion. Now, the Peerless 2500 series had some issues, right, if they worked really hard.
2300s too, if the ones that were used.
Well, the 23s, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah, the 25s, they're tank transmissions. That's the high-low range. Mostly shaft-driven hydros. The 23s I'm thinking of.
Right.
But the Simplicity Alice transmissions and that axle tube. That axle tube is just a weak point. And even the guys, now I'm going to get some more feedback here, but even the guys in the Simplicity Alice clubs and groups and forums will tell you if they've done it for years, they've messed with them a lot, it's the weak link. Don't put a lot of wheel weights on that tractor and then go dragging really heavy crap and jerking and yanking, because you'll end up with a cracked axle tube, which is a real mess. Right. And you're pretty much done, or you got a full rebuild. And I think that's the weakest, because nobody's going to tell you not to put wheel weights on that and go yanking. You don't hear that, but you do. And I know you can overrun any of them. Right. But with this, you'll be warned by the guys that's done it. Be careful at axle tube, and there's actually some fixes, like putting clamps on there to give them extra support and hold them for when you are working.
Right.
So, my opinion, they're probably some of the weakest.
The normal failures I see with the Wheelhorse transmissions, third gear or the differential?
Well, I've not seen. Yeah, okay. One 1/8 speed that I recall.
Right. Third gear, even though it's even in the high and lows, they only engage like a quarter of the gear. Maybe it's a half, but it's not. They don't engage fully on the gear.
Well, now I can't.
At least that's what I've read. I haven't noticed it, but I do see a lot of failures in third.
Well, no, I'm not aware. I'm not pulling them apart and look, so I can't yay or nay on that. But I've not seen a lot of trouble with them. I think they're strong. But these Sears transmissions, I also think are very strong. And another thing I'm going to address real quick. That's not a Peerless transmission. That is if you go, Dave Hopper's got a website, Sears tractor manuals or free Sears tractor manuals, something like that. Google it, you'll find it. But if you go up there, he's got a ton of literature, not just manuals, but literature of all kinds for all things that Sears sold and just Roper branded stuff. And if you go back to some of the early Roper ad material, they even tout that they designed and built these rear ends themselves. So
Right.
and there's a lot of misconception. People swear up and down they're Peerlesses, but they're not.
Right.
They are a Roper designed and built transmission that ran from 66.
All the way up to, yeah, like 08 or so, whenever they
Right.
But I'm sorry for interrupting. The only difference between, the GT5000 and an older Suburban is in like 94, 95, they went over to a disc brake, so they changed that. But earlier than that, they made the transmission wider.
The mounts, anyway.
Yeah, the mount's wider, and they changed something with the input shaft pulley.
They did that also. Early on, they used spacers to get the mounts out wider.
Right.
And then they went away from that, where they widened them. And if you do try to take a later transmission and put it into an earlier tractor, you're right. There's several little issues, and it's best to, if you can just find another Suburban transmission to put in a Suburban, if you have to. Aren't custom axle shafts just a tad shorter?
Yes, the customs are just a tad shorter in width.
That's what I thought. So you don't want to put a custom rear end in a Suburban unless you're trying to narrow it up for your super wide tires for that pro street look. On the other hand, if you're trying to get that monster truck look for your custom, you could put the wider Suburban axle shaft transaxle in it and get it wider in the rear.
Another difference is on the GT5000 and 6000, the high and low shifter is on like a piece of chain link.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this is pinned directly.
Right. And there's some other little differences too, even in the Suburban line. The shifters themselves were shaped a little different
Right.
as we get up through the years. And the custom shifter, I believe,
Yeah, and on the GT6000, 5000, they're different. I'm not sure whether the thin tractor line that Casey likes is what
Well,
their
that-
shifters are.
well, at the time that was the midline. The Roper
I can't think of the...
Murray built the light end, and then Roper built a midline, like the 16.6, they call it different stuff, but it's not
Right.
these. It's kind of a square-bodied,
Right.
lighter framed, and then the Suburban were the top of the line until we get to 80, and then they came out with stuff like the square gray tractors, and then the FF series in the early 80s.
I mean, yeah, but overall, the transmissions are stout. Like I said, I've hurt a few myself, but that's because I've used my stuff.
Well, the frame may be a little thin, but this is still a very stout frame.
Exactly.
I wouldn't be scared of a quick way loader on this frame.
Yeah, that's a 2002 frame.
Yeah,
so.
this is a good thick heavy. They still, even when they went to the vertical shaft, I still think, and it was the year they went to the vertical shaft, they quit offering the quick way loaders.
That was 93.
And I still believe that the only thing it had to, because it was the same frame, you could reorientate the engine if you wanted to. They still use the same horizontal
Right.
shaft propane,
transmission and
right.
everything.
So you could reorient the engine if you wanted to. The chassis were still the same. The only reason I can, well, I mean, unless they just weren't selling, they were losing money, but the only reason on the tractor itself that I could see that they quit offering a loader was now we went to a vertical shaft in the same chassis, so we got to figure out how to get our pump up here and drive it,
Right.
or you know, so they just quit offering.
I mean, like the spin-offs, AYP or Roper at the time, which I can't remember exactly when that transition took effect, but like the spin-offs, like the Huskies and others, those were still horizontal in '94.
Right. Yeah. Well, actually, to get off the subject again, Don over there that was giving us some criticism on some of my videos, and he's just going to watch yours. He'll get you some criticism later. I've lost my train of thought real quick. Do you have any idea what it was?
No.
No, me neither. Let me have some.
But, you know, another thing I've heard over the years is, oh, well, that thing is a vertical shaft. That's just a basic lawnmower.
Well, and that's not true either. If you look at a lot of the heavy-duty stuff today, and over the last 20 years, the engine orientation doesn't have a lot to do with it. The chassis, the transaxle, and what you can do, how heavy it's built, is it ground engaging for real, not just says it on it, but is it for real? The orientation of the engine, because we're not running shaft-driven PTOs off of hardly any garden tractor, even going back into the 60s.
Right.
Very few of them actually had a shaft-driven PTO, and I know what I was going to say a while ago now, which is Roper went through a lot of name changes over the years before they really got watered down and dissolved in later years with Husqvarna.
Right, because it's now all Husqvarna.
Right, but I mean, Roper's David Bradley.
Exactly.
David Bradley, and the government threw a lawsuit, monopoly lawsuit at Sears there in the early 60s. And instead of selling off, because Sears actually owned David Bradley completely. And David Bradley made just a billion different items. They made everything. And so the government threw a monopoly lawsuit at them. And when they did that, Sears used smoke, mirror, and lights instead of selling off. And when the smoke cleared, the company was renamed Roper, still at the same place up here.
Right.
In the same town. A different name. Sears did sell off part of it. They still own the majority share.
Just like Allstate.
Right. But then as we get into I think it was about mid-'80s before the name changed again to AYP. It's the same company.
Right.
Getting watered down a little bit. The same basic company. And then, of course, later on, we really got...
It was Electrolux, Frigidaire.
Right. We went into a lot of different... But as far as the monopoly suits, the government they done the same thing to Alice Chalmers with Simplicity in the early 70s. And that's why from 71 to 74, Alice Chalmers sold the 3 and 400 series, which was different than the Simplicity, because Alice owned Simplicity.
Right.
And so they, when the government threw the monopoly suit against them, they actually, for the first time ever, moved production of the Alice Chalmers garden tractors to one of the Carolinas, north or south, I can't remember, to a whole different plant, came up, designed their tractors, and sold those as a separate line from the Simplicities, and they even changed hitches and things just enough for like the tiller and the sleeve hitch that it wasn't supposed to work with the Simplicity stuff, but it would with just a little bit of finagling. And then the government was off their back within a few years, and they went back to just rebadging Simplicity garden tractors or even lawn tractors as Alice Chalmers. So they used to do that, and Sears was another one they hit, was with these tractors. So,
I mean, yeah. That tractor there has a mower deck. That just means it's a lawnmower, right?
Yeah, no. And here's another big misconception, though. People think that they call these mowers. Back in the day, a lot of these different companies and models weren't even sold with a deck. They weren't sold with any attachment, not as part of the standard price. What they would do is, it's just like going into a Ford tractor dealer somewhere. When you bought the tractor and then you bought whatever attachments you wanted and you took it home, it was the same. I don't care, even Wheelhorse.
Right, they all did it.
Right, you bought a tractor because it was a multi-use tool. It was almost like a homeowner's Bobcat. Before there were Bobcats, way back when, you bought these tractors and you bought whatever attachments they wanted and you took it home. The deck was an extra cost option, just like a plow or a sleeve hitch, or some came standard with 3 points and things, but all this was extra cost options. Just because it can mow doesn't make it just a mower. I mean, if that's the case, that's what lowboy Cubs are.
Exactly.
Or I've seen a lot with Woods belly mowers underneath of them. So that doesn't. But speaking of decks, take a look at that compared to a modern deck.
Right. It actually is a heavy deck. I picked up one of those.
Oh, they weigh a ton. It's like a bush hog, but under the belly. I mean, it's and I've got the covers off of it now. But no, that is a big misconception. Just because it can mow doesn't make it just a mower. That's just one more of the chores or tasks that it's capable of doing. And if they were going to build these little tractors like this to do all these different tasks, what sense would it have made not to have made that one of the tasks that these little tractors could have done?
Right. I mean, they had parking lot sweepers for those old Suburbans.
They did.
Snow blowers. They had snow plows, 2 different versions, which you have both.
I got 2 right
Actually,
there.
they had 3.
Actually, those are both the bigger 46-inch, and there was 42-inch versions of the dozer. I don't think there's a 46-inch version of the trip spring.
They even had a reel mower. They had
And the thing is,
all kinds of stuff.
Well, and you got to remember, almost every company offered the same attachments. They offered well, there was generators that you could get that mounted on them and ran off the tractor, and you could go out on the site and work off of them. Some had air compressors that ran off the tractor. 540 RPM PTO attachments that ran off the tractor, so you could set it at the elevator and run the elevator to, load your grain or whatever you're doing. Or
they
hay
even had log splitters.
Right, log splitters. There was a lot of things you could get. These little tractors, and all of them, Simplicity, Wheelhorse, Roper, Sears, Case, whatever, they were all competing with each other. So they all, if these guys came out with an attachment, then Wheelhorse was going to bring that attachment out as quick as they could, because they weren't going to lose business, because Sears had an attachment that they didn't have available.
Right.
So these were just they were homeowner tractors, is what they were.
Right.
Little basic homeowner tractors. And they got pretty big over the years. You look at the FF Sears, they were large, like the 400 series John Deeres, they actually were brought out to compete with the 400 John Deere.
Yeah, and I got a chance to operate a couple 400 series this past week.
They're pretty cool stuff,
Yeah.
aren't they? Well, that Jacob, I had a Jacobson here.
I remember that big thing.
Yeah, 195 a while back. Well, actually, the Ford version is called an LGT 195 if you want to Google that, but they're big dogs. Similar in size to like a Simplicity Power Max. But the point is that they got pretty big as the years went by, and I mean, like the big Jake, power steering, and you got your high and low range hydro, Cat 0 3-point. It's a 15-inch rear wheel, 29-inch tires, 10-inch front wheels. They got large. These were built to do all kinds of tasks and chores with all kinds of attachments. And this is an ancestor of this, and it's meant to do many things itself.
Right. I mean, a lot of people don't know this, but in the later years of the Suburban, Havin took over for like their snow blowers. Well, Havin is no more.
Right.
But that's what people think. It's now AgriFab.
Right. I got a hab and tiller I got to go pick up tomorrow.
So,
But there's, and Brindley's still out there today.
right,
They're offering plows and discs and different things to go behind.
right. I mean, the downside to the sleeve hitch on this GT is there's no down pressure. Whereas with the 3-point, you can actually push down if you wanted some down pressure.
Well, but that's the exception to the rule, because most tractors that have
Hydraulics.
don't have down pressure. They have, even if the cylinder's a two-way cylinder, they'll have a slot so that it's not able to push down in the linkage.
Right.
Only a few actually have down pressure without a little bit of finagling. But you are right, and it is really nice. And another nice thing about the Suburbans is you see you got a lift arm on this one, and you see there's none here.
Right.
And you really can't so much, but there's no lift arm on a Suburban. Every attachment has its own. The 3-point on the rear is a separate lift for any rear attachment. And then if you've got your dozer or snowplow on the front, you have a separate lift arm for it. So the nice thing about these Sears is you literally can run two attachments. You can run a grader on the back and a dozer on the front at the same time. So if you're wanting to move material or level material, you can actually use the dozer to push it around and move it, and the grader in the back to level it and work with it. And I really do like that about them. And there's a few other tractors out there that have those capabilities, but not a lot. The Suburban's one of the few.
Right.
And that's kind of a cool thing about it.
The one thing I like about the sleeve hitch is there's no brand loyalty to the sleeve hitch, basically. What I'm trying to say is it doesn't matter what brand of attachment you got, a sleeve hitch will take it.
Well, and you're right, but you know, that happened. You get into the, well, we went from walking tractors to the riding tractors getting popular through the 40s and 50s, and even in the early 60s. And there was a lot of companies that went away that you probably never heard of now. There's a lot of brand of GTs out there. But most everybody had their own style of lift, rear lift. And
Right.
so the attachments for each of those rear lifts had to be for the same company. You got a Porter Cable tractor, it had its own little Porter Cable 3-point, which is a pretty cool little 3-point if you've ever saw it. But you had to have attachments specific to that lift. And as we got into the, and I got something else I want to hit real quick too, but as we got into the 60s, later 60s especially, we started getting into the standardized sleeve hitch. Every tractor brand got to where they had a sleeve hitch, and Brindley attachments, no matter what would fit a sleeve hitch and what brand it was on, it could be moved from tractor to tractor if you had a sleeve hitch on the back.
Right.
Real quick, here's a misconception that drives me stupid.
Okay.
The Sears 3-point is not a category 0. Everybody with these big tractors, big GTs with the Cat 0 3-point hitches, are always looking for their Brindley 12-inch moldboard plows and different things to go on the back, and they're picking up Sears 3-point plows and thinking these little 10-inch plows will fit their Cat 0.
It won't.
It won't. They're not. They make them. A lot of people make them and they work with them and they modify them, but these are small. What the Sears is actually smaller than a Cat 0 and is a Sears only.
Sears and Roper.
Well, Sears and Roper. You're right. It's a Sears and Roper only. The attachments are specific to it. You've got to have the Sears and Roper attachments to fit the Sears and Roper 3-point. I mean, it's just a common misconception. It's a smaller. Actually, what it is, it's the same as a sleeve hitch set up. Basically, your attachments are smaller, like sleeve hitch attachments. 10-inch plow, and for the weight and the size and what it'll do, It's just a different way of hooking up a sleeve hitch, but instead it was Sears' own 3-point that they came out with around 1959.
Right,
so
for
it was
the
kind
David
of a
Bradley.
it was kind of a dinosaur, a holdover as we went into sleeve hitch, and everybody got standardized, and it just stayed around clear up till well, into the 80s. I mean, they were still putting them on Suburban tractors and using them. You could still go to Sears and get them. But if you got a Cat Zero, you got a big tractor, D Wheelhorse, or a Case 400 series with a 3-point, or the Sears attachments are too little for you. The spacing's not right, and you need a 12-inch moldboard plow for a Cat Zero.
Right.
These are 10-inch moldboard plows like would be on a sleeve hitch. The same with discs, grater blades, and so forth. So that's common misconception. Just try, and you tell people and they don't. You're telling more people the next day, because since it's a 3-point, it's going to be the same. It's completely different. You're not going to want to pick up a Cat Zero moldboard plow with a Sears 3-point hitch, because those are stinking heavy.
Oh yeah, I've got a big Brindley moldboard plow for this Craftsman, and it's heavy.
It is, but the Cat Zero are a lot heavier than our 10-inch sleeve hitch size or Sears size. So it's a
Okay. Well, guys, it's cold out here, and battery's getting ready to die on the camcorder.
And I'm sure you're really bored with us at this point and wishing we'd shut up so you could go do something else, or you've already shut us off.
But anyway, I'll talk to you guys later. This has been Elkskins and Jim down at Jim's house. Alright, bye.
Good one, guys.
Right here, guys, is a fine example of a fake GT.
Make sure they can see that those are keyed on back wheels, not bolt on.
Yeah, those are keyed on back wheels.
But I mean, it's got the 12-inch backs, it's got the 8-inch front. It looks like a GT to the unsuspecting buyer.
But it's got the...
And it says garden tractor. That's why you really got to watch. You got to watch what you're doing and research it if you're looking for a real GT.
Right. I forgot about this being back here. Otherwise, we could have included it earlier in the video and not at the end.
Right. But this is a very light duty. You can look at the frame. It's a light. It's a pan, basically, just a pan frame.
It's the same frame as what you had on that LT a couple weeks ago when I was here.
Well, on a couple of the LTs. I mean, this front axle is very light under there.
Right.
It's an LT with bigger wheels and tires that claims to be a GT.
Exactly. So, you know, you got to watch what you're looking at, guys.
Now you buy that and go to plow with it or push dirt for a little bit and you'll have it tore up before you know it, because the transmission's a light LT transmission. It's a light frame. It's not really a GT.
Right. And Sears did this, or Roper did it a couple of years too, in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yep, yeah, I had one of those years ago.
But, alright guys, this is going to be the true end. We just wanted to show you this really quick. Alright, bye.